in academia who think that may be a good idea, but most people around the world think that that's a pretty damaging way to organize a society. So morality might well have a universal basis, and in that sense is completely in the domain of fact. I'm not saying it's established fact. I mean, it can be debated in those terms. I want to turn, though, a little bit more deeply to this issue of the existence of God, because that's kind of what we're debating here, and I want to do it purely by appealing to the same reason and science and evidence that Dan has relied on in his opening statement. Now, for a couple of hundred years, it did appear that scientific evidence was cutting, you might say, against theism. We had Copernicus showing that the Earth is not the center of the universe. The Earth goes around the sun. We had Newton with his idea of the clockwork universe, the idea the universe is a kind of machine. It might require some divine jump starting, but it doesn't require divine sustenance or intervention. Then we have Darwin's idea, which Dan has sort of been excited about, the idea that so we can have design but no designer. But that was basically 150 years ago. I want to suggest that there have been startling recent developments in the last 100 years in physics, in astronomy, that strongly support theism, strongly support the idea of a creator, and are invulnerable to Darwinian attack. Let me begin the story sort of this way. About 1500 years ago, somebody posed a question to the church father Augustine, a very interesting question, which goes kind of this way. When you think of time, time goes back, but no matter how far back it goes, you can always think of it going further back. So if you say 5,000 years ago, someone could say 5,001 years ago. 1 million years ago, 1,000,001 years ago. It's kind of impossible to think of time as having any kind of a beginning. You can always retreat further into the past. And the question for Augustine was very simple. Could God have created the universe? And if he did, what was he doing before that? How did God occupy his time prior to creating a universe? And to this question, Augustine gave an astounding answer. He said, in effect, God created time along with the universe. In other words, before the universe, and we have to put the word before in quotation marks, there was no time. Once upon a time, there was no time. A kind of startling idea. Except that today, if you walk into an introductory physics course, you will learn that one of the direct implications of the Big Bang is that not only matter, but space and time had a beginning. In other words, one of the implications of the Big Bang is that not only did all the stuff of the universe, but space itself and time itself come into existence at a discrete point, what scientists call a singularity. This, I would suggest, is modern support. It's not a proof. We're not here debating proofs. We are debating evidence that would seem to suggest that all of nature, all of matter came into existence at a given time. That, I would suggest, tends to corroborate something Augustine said with no evidence behind him. He claimed that, in effect, he got it from theology or he got it from revelation. My point is, Augustine didn't write to force agreement with science. Augustine stated a theological proposition, and modern science has come 1,500 years later to agree with him. Here's a second thought. In recent decades, scientists have asked the following question, and that is, why does the universe have the values that it does? Our universe has an incredibly wide and diverse set of very precise values. You can almost think, in fact, Lee Smolin, the physicist, whom Dan cites in his book, speaks about God as sitting, in a sense, at a big desk with 100 dials. And each dial reflects one of the values or forces of the universe. There is the mass of the electron, the mass of the proton, the gravitational force, the electromagnetic force, the electroweak force, and so on and so on. And the question is this: why are those numbers set at precisely what they are? What if you were to move in and, let's say, fool with the dials a little bit, change them a little? What would happen? The scientists who asked this question came up with a very startling conclusion, and that is, if you touch the dials, if you fool with them, not to the point of 50% or 20% or even 1%. Stephen Hawking says in his brief history of time that if you touch one of the dials, this is the expansion rate of the universe, and move it 1 part in 100,000 millionth million, we would have no universe, we would have no life. In other words, the constants and values of the universe appear to be fine-tuned precisely for, well, us. Now, my question to Dan Dennett. To me, the fine-tuned universe, which by the way has no Darwinian explanation, the Darwinian explanation has to do with how one life form became another. I'm going to come back in my rebuttal and discuss what I think is Dan's promiscuous overextension of Darwin into areas that have nothing to do with evolution at all, to claim the prestige of science for very dubious theories about why humans laugh, why do they go to the toilet, and so on. We'll come to that later. What I want to say here is simply this. The laws of the universe are not established in a Darwinian way. And yet, what is the atheist explanation for how they came to be what they are? Why is the universe apparently fine-tuned for life? It would seem, Occam's razor, the logic of simplicity, would seem to say, a creator designed it that way. We may not know who built the car, or we may not know who did the painting, but is it even reasonable to suggest that the universe and all its laws created themselves? Let me put it a slightly different way. If we think of modern science has spent the last 500 years doing what? Excavating the intelligence built into the laws of nature. We live apparently in a rational universe that reflects extremely complicated laws, right? Kepler's laws of planetary motion, Newton's inverse square law, Einstein's E equals mc squared, and so on. My question is, if our most brilliant scientists have spent their entire lifetime trying to decode the intelligence out of nature, who put it there? Or if not, a good question for Dan, how did it get there? Where did this intelligence come from? What is its explanation? What is your account for why nature obeys laws in the first place? You want to go to other cultures, you realize that this notion of a universe obeying laws is a Western and in fact to a large degree a Christian idea. Other cultures deny it. The Muslim thinker Ghazali says it's absolutely ridiculous, the idea that nature follows laws. You and I can follow a law, but that's because we are intentional, purposeful human beings. We're driving on a road, we see a stop sign, we can follow a law. But can an electron follow a law? Can inanimate objects follow laws? It's preposterous. So Ghazali says the universe exists in the mind of Allah. Things happen because Allah intervenes every second to make them happen in exactly the way they happen. The reason I'm telling you this is I want to suggest that the premises of modern science themselves are based upon Christian metaphysics. The idea that the universe is rational. It obeys laws. These laws are accessible to our human minds. There is no Darwinian reason it must be so. Yes, we evolved, and I agree with Dan about this, but we evolved to survive, if you will, in hunter-gatherer primitive environments. We did not evolve to figure out the rotation of the planets. We did not necessarily evolve to figure out the theory of relativity. So evolution can tell us why we survive and why we adapt, but evolution can't tell us why we believe certain things to be true. Even Stephen Hawking admits this. There is no reason to believe that the stuff going on in your head is made up of atoms and molecules that interact with each other. Now, how do you know that that neuronal firing inside your head must match up and have a one-to-one correspondence with the rationality of the universe out there? Why must it be so? There is no reason. Now, if you're a Christian, you know why it's so. If you're a Christian, you say, I know why the universe is rational. It was created by an omniscient, super-rational God. I know why the universe obeys laws.